Welcome to Crossroads. I was at the riots in Los Angeles last night. In this episode, I'll be going over some of what I personally saw there. I'll also be showing you some of the clips of what was taking place, and I'll also be going over some of the latest updates on where things are at right now with it. Also, I went down to the U.S.-Mexico border in San Diego the other day. I got updates on what's been happening with the military presence, the militarized land. I know a lot of you were asking about that, the border wall, and also the current status of the processing facilities, the things facilitating most of what we've been watching. Personally, I met with Manny Bayon. He's a National Border Patrol Council Union spokesperson in San Diego. We got some info, of course. You might remember him from the investigations I did in Panama last year at the border. I'll be going over that in a bit as well. But first, I want to go over what's been happening in Los Angeles. First off, quick updates. The Epoch Times said this: the National Guard has been deployed to Los Angeles specifically to protect federal buildings, including the downtown detention center where protesters concentrated. It noted that earlier, U.S. Northern Command said about 500 Marines were on standby to deploy to Los Angeles. Again, you have Camp Pendleton just a little bit south of L.A. It says that's in addition to approximately 300 National Guardsmen. Northcom said in a press release, quote, approximately 500 Marines from 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines at 29 Palms, California are in a prepared to deploy status should they be necessary to augment and support the DoD's protection, the Pentagon, of federal property and personnel efforts. It says under the Posse Comitatus Act, active duty military can only be deployed in specific circumstances. It says the Insurrection Act of 1807, which Trump has not yet committed to using, lists these exceptions, which include things like suppressing insurrections, enforcing federal authority, and protecting civil rights when state authorities fail to act. Briefly on that, I should note that Trump has, of course, invoked an invasion against the United States, saying that America is under invasion. He has also invoked the Alien Enemies Act, declaring both that we're under attack by terrorists, gangs, cartels, and also under foreign invasion, notably, he says, by Venezuela. Now, it notes here, the statement makes clear that no final decision has yet been made on whether or not to declare the ongoing riots in violation of the Insurrection Act. Although I should note, and I'll show you in a bit, Trump in his public statements is referring to the riots as an insurrection. And the context of that would be if he's declared America as under invasion, if he's declared a national crisis of the border, which he has done, and he's also declared that we're under attack by terrorist organizations and foreign governments, both as, again, cartels and with mass illegal immigration, including of gangs. He has been calling this protest, these riots, as an uprising, as a type of insurrection by these organizations. Now, briefly, as for the National Guard, California Governor Gavin Newsom, he's moving to file a lawsuit against the Trump administration, against the federal government, and this is over the existing order to use the National Guard. The argument he has is that Trump bypassed the governor to have the National Guard deployed. Now, in terms of law, technically with that, the president can bypass the governor under the circumstance that a state is not enforcing federal law. So, that could turn into a much larger debate, really, over whether sanctuary city laws are considered a state not enforcing federal law. That'll probably be an ongoing case. We could see it go to the Supreme Court. Now, on another note, I mentioned a U.S. Northern Command. They did also confirm the deployment. I also saw them there personally, which I'll be going into a bit. But there was the official announcement. They said the California Guard, i.e. the National Guard, which that's basically the state-level military, the National Guard. They said they have deployed approximately 300 soldiers to 3 separate locations in the greater Los Angeles area. They are conducting safety and protection of federal property and personnel. Now, on that note, the Department of Homeland Security, they also posted what's become one of the more iconic photos from the riots, and they issued a statement saying order will be restored. And as you can see, it's an individual standing on a burning vehicle with a Mexican flag. Now, in terms of what I saw personally, let me show you how things were looking last night. This is from when I was first arrived in the downtown area. This was just outside an area that became one of the big focal points of the riots. Watch. So we're here in LA, the Edward R. Roybal Federal Building just over there. There's a dispersal order. We can't get in right now, but just as a quick update, I mean, you can see the police helicopter's still up. Officers are blocking the roads. We can hear explosions actually just now over there. We can't get in. They had a dispersal order up, so that means basically if you're on the street, they're probably going to arrest you or try to. The officers here blocking it. That guy just tried getting in. They wouldn't let him actually, so case in point. What we are told, there's still looting going on. There's still vehicles on fire. It does seem the situation is pretty, it's not safe yet, but it's still going on. Everything beyond here is where it's taking place. LAPD police, they have roadblocks up, the areas that are still of concern. They're not letting in just like normal traffic. In other words, I have not yet seen military. I have not yet seen, federal. They're not. That just means they're not in this area. Driving around other parts of LA, coming in. Everything in a lot of other places seems okay still, but it's again centralized. So some areas pretty bad. Some areas not so much. Edward R. Federal Building pretty rough still. So we can't get in. We'll give you more updates as the night goes on. Now, after that, in the direction of where I heard the explosions, I noticed there was a big billow of black smoke. I got closer to it. I went over that area. I did see fireworks going off close to the ground. My assumption was that those were the explosives. I assume protesters were maybe throwing at the police. We did see incidents of that earlier in the day. But the black smoke, that was a whole different issue. This is what I came across when I got closer. We could see the burning car from back there. So we're just around the corner from the Federal Building. Federal Building's down that way. The police have the whole area blocked off. This vehicle's burning here. Police have a checkpoint up. They say don't go any closer, because there's a burning vehicle, honestly. Again, we're here with the LA riots. You have some guys running around, helmets on, black masks. I can tell you my personal feeling right now, you have some rogue groups running around. I've seen some like Antifa-looking guys on scooters and stuff. What I've been told, you are going to have some people doing like dispersal things. They're going around areas, causing things like this. They're trying to distract police. A lot of people stopping. And so currently that's what we're seeing. Keep you updated through the night. We're going to be going around having some look at some areas. Now, I mentioned it briefly in that video. You hear a sound of the fire kind of doing like a whoosh sound. Closer up to it, it sounded almost like a small explosion. Anybody who's seen action movies, they show the cars exploding when the fire hits the gas tank. In reality, when it hits the gas tank, the fire just gets bigger. And so that whoosh, I assume that's when the fire hit the gas tank. And you can see in there that, again, the fire is pretty serious. Not long after that, a fire truck did arrive, and right behind it was a big, long line of police cars. They had riot police inside. They established a perimeter around it. They made us leave the area. And again, we're fairly stern about it. Everyone had to leave. Let me show you how that went. All right, so burning vehicle back here. You can see the police, the fire department coming in. So right down there is the Federal Building. Police are coming in, as you can see. They had a big burning. It looked like a van on fire. They have the road blocked off. It looks like it's not an official police officer blocking the road earlier until the, of course, full force could get here. As you can see, police now riot gear on. I think we got our go. Now, right after that, the police gave dispersal orders, so we couldn't hang around. Effectively, if they give a dispersal order, if you hang out there, they arrest you. So we had to leave that area. From there, we walked around a bit more. I was going to go live, but a lot of these things were isolated, so it took a bit to go from one area to the next. After that, I went to outside one of the main areas, the jail. That was one of the big focal points also. There was graffiti everywhere. I mean, these protesters, a lot of them, they're spray painting all over the place, expletives and so on. LA, they might have to spend a lot of money cleaning that up, or maybe they'll leave it for political reasons, who knows. But as was stated, the National Guard was there. They were at the federal building, in this case, the jail, and they were helping police protect the building. That was also near one of the overpasses. Earlier in the day, you might have seen videos going on. Protesters are throwing objects over the overpasses onto the freeway. They were throwing things at police cars and so on. This is what I saw there at night. Watch. Over here, we see National Guard with police. Again, LA riots going on. It's actually getting pretty hot out here. So in the main area over here, they have it all cordoned off. You can't go past. We've gone to a few different areas. They have police checkpoints set up, riot gear, the whole 9 yards. National Guard with the police here. This is the actual court, the federal building, one of the courthouses, jails. Down here is where actually you had some people throwing stuff off the freeway earlier. Let's come over here, you can see it. Just a minute ago, they had trucks set up. They were blocking all traffic. Looks like traffic's still out. If it were light, you could see they were shining lights on it. The windshields of these police cars, some of them were damaged, pretty badly. Other areas, the freeway's totally blocked off. Over there on the other side, just a minute ago, we saw fire department come in. There was another car on fire. I can tell you some of what I've seen out here. There was an individual here just a minute ago, protester, goggles on and so on. He was talking to himself. I looked over, he had a radio on, radio stuck in his backpack. So the protesters are communicating with each other. I've seen it firsthand now, and they're giving orders to the different protesters on where to go. They ordered them to go over there where that car fire took place. So the protesters are coordinating. The guy I saw looked like a pretty burly white guy. So not your normal protester you might think you're seeing out here. Some really weird stuff going on, but I'll keep you updated. Now, something I saw that was very interesting I want to point out. When I was at that overpass, I saw something very strange. This was just before another vehicle was set on fire on the other side of the freeway. So, across from where we were, there was a man who looked like a protester. He came up right alongside me. I was kind of, I wasn't wearing a suit or anything like that, so he maybe thought it was just there. Guy was dressed like a protester. He looked in the direction where the fire was started just after that. Again, you could see it. They lit another car on fire. Right before that happened, I heard someone talking over a radio. I looked over, it was this guy, normal dressed, white guy. It was not like, I think you see in the news, they make it look it's all, Mexican protesters. This was white guy, looked like Antifa. He had the normal, some of the normal things they have. He dressed like one of the protesters. He had a painter mask. They buy those gas masks for, painting and so on. I saw a lot of other protesters holding the exact same painter gas masks. And interestingly, I saw something else. He had a radio hidden in his backpack. You could see the antenna sticking out because I was right next to him. It looked pretty expensive. I don't know my radios that well, but he had a radio in his backpack and he had the thing hidden so he could talk normally like this and communicate with whoever he was communicating with. He looked in the direction of where the fire was going to start, and it was interesting because, look, after seeing that, right after that, the fire started. And I also heard the other protesters talking, coordinating, saying that's the next area, and they went over in that direction where the fire started soon, right before it happened. Now, I mentioned this to war correspondent Michael Yon, because I was concerned about what I saw. He of course covers a lot of riots like this. Excuse me. Michael Yon, of course, covers a lot of riots like this, and he mentioned something interesting. He said, what I saw with these radio operations, it's the common way of operating with the Antifa rioters, the kind of grassroots of the very communist socialist organizations. And although I wasn't able to confirm who this guy was or what he was up to in particular, that does fit in with the pattern we've seen with these exact same organizations. And look, it does seem the riots, they have a few main groups, just from my observation. You do have your grassroots, normal people out there. It's Los Angeles, right? You do have people who just genuinely don't support the deportations. You have a lot of illegal immigrants. Remember, last I checked, Los Angeles was the second largest Spanish-speaking city in the world. You have a lot of them there. There's also just your college kids. I saw a lot of, college kid-looking protesters, and, I saw a lot of the ones that look like they're part of the pro-Gaza thing. There were also just a lot of opportunists out there. People looking to have fun or looking to, thrill seekers, or people looking to loot, joining in with that. And there were also what looked like the professional agitators. Those are the ones I was most concerned about personally. And these are the groups often tied in with communist and socialist organizations. You see them at the pro-Gaza protests. You see them with the BLM riots. These are the ones who kind of instigate things. And they do also tend to run the agitation propaganda campaigns like this. So again, you have your normal grassroots protesters, your opportunists, then you have your professionals, and these ones tend to travel around. They also tend to be the ones who carry out the more extreme acts, the arson, the rioting, the breaking into buildings. These are the guys who start it and then, anticipate the crowd's going to follow their footsteps. I saw evidence of that when I was there. Now, overall, on the riots, I personally do not think last night is going to be the end. I assume it's going to go on today. I assume you're probably going to have some of these same agitation groups out there. And what I assume, based on my own analysis, what I think is going to happen, you'll see these agitators causing problems. You'll see them instigating the crowd, and the crowd is going to expand their operations based on what they're doing. This is very likely something we're going to see to various degrees in parts of the country also. I don't think these are going to be limited to Los Angeles, just going by what we've seen in previous protests and the way, especially when you have these organized protesters involved, you will probably see them start up things in other parts of the country. Just my personal assumption based on what we've seen before. This is also something I assume will escalate into broader legal challenges, especially around the sanctuary city laws. You'll probably watch, again, Gavin Newsom is looking to sue the Trump administration. You'll probably watch that become one of the big talking points in the media. They're actually trying to blame Trump for a lot of the chaos. I'll show you in a bit. And that will very likely also start a broader legal debate. I personally do not think Donald Trump is going to stop the deportations based on that. Going by what we've seen from Trump in just about every instance, it tends to be the case that when he gets called out, he doubles down. It's very likely he is going to probably increase the operations rather than decrease. I'd say it's more likely what's happening will lead to them enhancing the operations of deportations, law enforcement, and so on. They'll probably bolster the ranks in LA. They could possibly even go after anybody they say has been obstructing law enforcement on this. And I would actually say they might even go after some of the masked protesters. They are suggesting this. The individuals who look like they're the organizers. I can tell you, I have talked to law enforcement. They're aware of these organizations because they do track them. And so what often happens, this was seen during the BLM riots, this was seen in other riots, you have your normal grassroots protesters, but then you have the ones that move between riots. They do trace their cell phones. They know when they're coming in. I mean, they have other ways of tracing them. When they come in, they know these organizations. When they go to an area, that's when you see the violence. That's when you see the riots. That's when you see breaking into buildings. That's when things get bad. They know who they are. They just haven't really done anything about it in previous riots. We'll see if things change with this one. In terms of Immigration Customs Enforcement, ICE, the official ICE account released photos and rap sheets of many of the illegal alien criminals they've been arresting. Because on the side of ICE, that's the other big narrative. Remember, the main kind of meta-narrative right now, you have ICE, Immigration Customs Enforcement, trying to carry out mass deportations. They've gotten orders from the Trump administration, increase your operations. They're saying go from like 1,000 a day to 3,000 a day. Los Angeles is going to be a big focus of that because they have a lot of illegal immigrants in Los Angeles. They're going to head with the state of California because they're a sanctuary state. Police are not allowed to work with ICE. And as we've been seeing, that creates problems. That means, of course, that if ICE starts, facing protesters, people blocking them, police are not allowed to assist ICE. And it's kind of a gray area on to what extent they help protect ICE. We have seen in other parts of the country, including in New York, that when ICE, federal agents, anybody calls for local assistance from police, if police help them, the police can face a misdemeanor criminal charge. And so, they do tend to be wary of it. That issue is what's boiling to the surface right now. The official ICE account, they stated this. They say America's brave ICE officers are removing the worst of the worst from LA's streets, while LA's leaders are working tirelessly against them, meaning against the ICE officers trying to do this. The account went on to list the criminal histories of many of the people they're deporting. I don't know if this is, again, representative of the entire group. Obviously, for the public accounts, they're going to pick the worst of the worst. So that's what they're showing here. Now, look, as for the politics of all of this, the local politicians, other individuals, they're taking a very different narrative. Governor Gavin Newsom and the mayor, others, they're blaming this on Donald Trump. They're saying Donald Trump is the one to blame for the chaos. They're saying he's effectively instigating this. This is what Governor Gavin Newsom wrote on X. He said, "Let's get this straight. 1, local law enforcement did not need help." I should note that's contested because local law enforcement has made some conflicting statements on the internet, including with videos. They have suggested that they were overwhelmed, and of course they were under attack. There were, of course, police getting their cars, having objects thrown at them, blocking freeways, police being blocked from going into areas. I can tell you personally, though, on the point of Gavin Newsom, he says local law enforcement did not need help. When I was there last night, you only had about 300 National Guard. They were mostly focused on security around the buildings. I can personally say LAPD was handling it very well. I can personally confirm that at least last night, LAPD had the thing very much under control, at least on the perimeters. I don't know internally because we couldn't get in. Another point here. Gavin Newsom said this. He said Trump sent troops anyway to manufacture chaos and violence. As of last night, the only troops that Trump sent were the 300 National Guard troops. You could see it in my video exactly what the National Guard was doing. They were not manufacturing chaos. They were not manufacturing violence. They were just standing with the police doing the security operations. So personally, if they were manufacturing chaos and violence, at least what I saw on the perimeters, there was no visible evidence of that. But that's the narrative they're going with. They say, number 3, Trump succeeded in manufacturing chaos and violence. The suggestion, I assume here, is that the image of this, the optics, instigated the crowd. You can believe what you want on that, but he said this, 4, now things are destabilized, and we need to send in more law enforcement just to clean up Trump's mess. Now, look, on that point, as for Donald Trump, he's, of course, countering that. Donald Trump issued a statement saying paid insurrectionists, suggesting, of course, that there are instigators there doing this, instigating the crowd, and these insurrectionists are the ones being paid and causing a lot of the chaos. And interestingly, Trump also said he called for the arrest of the masked protesters. And again, I personally saw that. There were very organized individuals who seemed to be different from the normal grassroots protesters who did seem to be instigating it. Now, in response to Governor Gavin Newsom, Trump wrote that he and the Los Angeles mayor, again, Newsom and Los Angeles mayor, should, quote, apologize to the people of Los Angeles for the absolutely horrible job they have done, he said. And this now includes the ongoing LA riots. I assume he's talking about not just LA and the riots, but also the fires and so on. He said, quote, "These are not protesters. They are troublemakers and insurrectionists." He said, "Remember, no masks." So Trump, in his statements, is seeming to go directly after the instigators, some of the individuals I was pointing to that I personally saw, actually. Donald Trump also wrote that, quote, "A once great American city, Los Angeles, has been invaded and occupied by illegal aliens and criminals. This is important because if Trump deploys the military, he needs to declare that there's an insurrection." And here's what Trump said: "Now, violent insurrectionist mobs are swarming and attacking our federal agents to try and stop our deportation operations." And he said, "But these lawless riots only strengthen our resolve," suggesting what I assume this is going to cause a stronger response from the federal government, I assume. And Trump said this. He said, "I am directing Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, and Attorney General Pam Bondi, Justice Department, in coordination with all other relevant departments and agencies, to take all such actions necessary to liberate Los Angeles from the migrant invasion and put an end to these migrant riots." Now, this is important because remember the context of what a migrant invasion refers to. Donald Trump has invoked the Alien Enemies Act. The basis of that is he's saying we are under invasion, notably in his public statement by Venezuela, and in conjunction with that, gangs, notably Tren de Aragua. And so when he invokes the idea of a migrant invasion, that also has legal implications. And he's saying they need to put an end to these migrant riots, which he's now framing as an insurrection, as a connection to the invasion. Again, this is suggesting that he could really ramp things up. Trump also said, quote, "Order will be restored, the illegals will be expelled, and Los Angeles will be set free." He said, "Thank you for your attention to this matter." Based on my personal analysis of what Trump is suggesting here, they're probably going to use these riots as an excuse to broaden the operations of deportations. This will not just be riot control. I assume this will mean broader deportation efforts. Going by these statements, other statements from others in the administration, I'd say it seems the Trump administration, they're going to use this to seriously increase their operations in and around Los Angeles. And it could be the case that LA becomes kind of the model or the focal point of this, of what happens when people try to block ICE, which will, of course, enable them to broaden their operations elsewhere as well. This is the focal point that's going to define this entire picture. Now, look, on a related point, I also drove down to check out what's going on with the border operations. I'll be talking more about this after we come back from a quick break.
Experts agree. One of the best ways to protect against financial uncertainty is to diversify your portfolio. Learn how physical gold and silver can secure your retirement funds from today's economic challenges. With a gold IRA from American Hartford Gold, you can safeguard your wealth with no penalties or taxes when you transfer your current qualifying retirement accounts. Call now and our precious metals specialists will send you a free information kit, no cost or obligation. American Hartford Gold, a trusted industry leader with an A+ from the Better Business Bureau, has a 5-star rating from thousands of happy clients. Whether you are getting physical precious metals in a gold IRA or delivered to your doorstep, we offer only the highest quality gold and silver. For your peace of mind, we also offer a no-fee buyback commitment, a low price guarantee, along with free shipping and free insurance. So don't wait. Call the number on your screen today and secure your financial future.
Welcome back. Big changes have been happening at the border wall and along the border as well. We heard about the huge drop in encounters, people encountering illegal aliens, in other words, for deportations. As someone who has been covering the border for a long time now, I personally wanted to see what the actual situation on the ground was, like what's really going on. So I went there, and I know a lot of the audience, you've been asking me about what's happening with the military presence, what's going on with the status of deportations. Is it what they say it is? What's happening with the military taking over that whole strip of land along the border? And also, what is the status of the processing facilities? Are they still doing it? Those of you who watched my documentary last year, Weapons of Mass Migration, Remember, I went down to Panama, I went to Mexico, I was at the U.S.-Mexico border. One of the individuals I spoke to when I was investigating that whole thing, that was Manny Bayon. He's a National Border Patrol Council Union spokesperson in San Diego. I went and I met with him on Friday to get some updates on where things are at right now. He took me around. I got some videos for y'all. Let me show you how things went when we were looking at the migrant processing facility, where it's at now. Watch this.
Welcome
Manny,
back. All right.
Awesome seeing you again.
All right, good.
So I'm sure you all remember we talked to Manny here with the Border Patrol Union, of course, Border Patrol agent also. And last time, of course, this was a very different area. This was the processing facility. So when they were bringing the illegal immigrants down, they were taking them here, they process them, then they bus them into America. What's it now, Manny?
Well, now it's an empty lot. It was a centralized processing center here in San Diego. We would process average 1,000 migrants a day.
A day?
A day.
Wow.
And then obviously they would be bussed out to the local transportation facilities and welcome here to America.
What a change, right? Massive change from what it was like last year when I was there. What used to be a huge tent, you had DHS, Department of Homeland Security there, you had ICE there operating. That's where they were processing people to come into the United States. Massive change. The whole thing's just an empty lot now. They tore everything down. Nothing is there other than just, you know, the fencing around the big empty lot. Nothing is there. It's gone. Now, according to an ex-post from the chief patrol agent of the San Diego border, they said this: due to the unprecedented decrease in illegal crossings this year, the massive 1,000-person San Diego sector soft-sided facility has been dismantled. And they said in March 2025, San Diego sector arrested 1,199 illegal aliens with an average of 38 per day. They say this was a 186% drop compared to March 2024. So just massive change, folks. That is a huge drop in numbers. The closure of this processing facility, it's a very big deal because that facility, that was a key part of how the operations were being done last year. The facilitated part of the mass illegal immigration. Basically, here's how it happened. It was one of many facilities that was being used to process the waves of people, and they were granting them things like, you know, temporary protection status, that kind of stuff. It was people saying, you know, I believe my life's in danger. They apply for amnesty, they go into the system, and then they're on the wait list, and then they're internally in the United States, and then they got parole, which also made them eligible for things like, you know, Social Security, you know, welfare, free housing, free food, and everything else. Like, that's how the system was working, basically. That's all shut down now, at least those big facilities. Now, right after that, we drove to the border wall. You know, Manny, of course, he's a Border Patrol agent, also with the union, so we could go beyond the wall to the middle area where the agents patrol. We went to that area, and this is in San Diego, again, close by that facility to get some updates. I wanted to find out what the military's been up to and what the area looks like. This is what it's like. Watch this.
We have 6 strands of razor wire there on the primary fence. That actually separates Mexico from the United States.
Yeah, so that's the primary fence. This is secondary fence, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So the military's putting this up?
Yes.
So can you tell me what the military presence has been here like?
Well, the military, you know, thanks to President Trump sending the military to help us, they came in here in droves, and they said, okay, we're here to help.
Yeah.
So then they got rolls of razor wire, and they said, okay, they developed a plan with the engineering. They some support, right? Because you know, obviously you need support to hold up the razor wire.
Yeah.
And they went to town, and look at this, is beautiful.
So driving around, I haven't seen military yet. Like how big is the presence here?
The primary focus was our station, Chula Vista, and then they went over to Imperial Beach after.
So is that where they're at right now then, more so? Or are they still down here much?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. We still have a military presence here.
Now, I know a big question a lot of people had also was, well, how fast does it take them to deport people? Because, it's an obvious question. If they're arresting, if for example, the encounters have gone from about 1,000 today, each day, to about 60 or 30 per day, well, how long does it take them to deport them? Are they released into the country? It's a common question. I spoke with Manny about this. He mentioned the speed in which things are happening. They've gotten much faster. Border crossers are now deported within hours of being arrested. So they don't bring them into the country. They don't release them. If they arrest them, they're out of the country within hours. Now, after that, we drove further west along that road, and we went to a spot that's still has a very large opening in the wall. You might remember when I was out there last year, we were up on this is the area where we were up on the mountain looking down at. This is a huge gap in the wall. The gap is still there. And basically parts of the wall, they're still unbuilt. The reason is the construction was frozen by executive order under the previous administration. And because of the process of getting that restarted, they haven't started rebuilding it yet. But let me show you how that looks right now at that section. Watch. We were out here last time. Last time we were up on the hill, way up there looking down here. So we're closer this time. But I see the gap has not been closed
here
in this area.
Still here. I mean, we're hoping to get it done here. You could walk into the United States unimpeded from Mexico to the United States, and you go into Mexico from the United States into Mexico.
Yeah, so there's a guy at the corner of that. I think he's trying to hide from us now. He's hiding behind
yeah,
it. But
now he knows
he
that we're out
moved,
here,
but
that we're
but he
looking at him.
has a chair over there. What's that guy doing? Do you know?
I don't know. He's probably a scout or probably the gatekeeper for people for people coming to here.
Yeah. So, I mean, I remember last time we were here, you were saying that there's some big issues here. They found a couple dead bodies, and the Posolero, they called him, he was not too far from here. What were these?
Well, the dead bodies, this is called in Mexico the Nido de las Águilas, where it's not very frequently by police, Mexican police, so they would get rid of their human remains, bodies, along the fence on the south side there.
Well, I've talked to people. They said they were finding mass graves. I know there were protests in Mexico about mass graves. Was that real?
I think it was in Juarez, El Paso area. Guadalajara, they just recently found another mass grave there that they're trying to identify.
So are those cartel battles, or are those people who couldn't pay the traffickers? What are they? Do you know?
We can only assume, right? We don't know for a fact, but obviously they're involved in some way.
Yeah. Now, anybody who wants to watch the longer versions of those interviews, I mean, some of them are pretty long. That last one was over 9 minutes long. If you want to watch the whole things, I'll post them on my X account. So anybody who wants to watch more of that, I'll be posting them later on my X account. That's Josh J. Philipp. Also, in terms of what's happening in Los Angeles, I should also be getting more updates on that as well. Epoch Times, we do have several reporters out there. We're getting updates, and so I will be keeping you updated on it. So that said, folks, questions, comments, leave them in the chat. Let's get to it now. First question is from Ashley from California. You're saying, what's up with the president in Mexico calling for protests from her people in the U.S. over tax remittances on taxes? That's huge. That's a really big deal. Real quick also, folks, if you haven't hit the like button, hit the like button. It does help us a lot. So hit the like button, leave a comment. Again, those of you new to the channel, I jump into questions second half, so leave your questions, comments, we'll go over it. So on the point of the president of Mexico, Claudia Sheinbaum, okay, I'll read you the exact quote she gave. This did in fact happen. She said this, quote, "If necessary, we will mobilize. We do not want taxes on remittances from our compatriots from the United States to Mexico." That's an extremely big deal. Let me explain why that is. So first of all, in the big, beautiful bill, right, the bill they're trying to pass right now, they're trying to pass taxes on remittances. That's when, of course, you have people come here and work and they send money home. Now, that's not just an issue with illegal immigrants. That's also an issue with like legal immigrants. There are some exceptions to the way that works. Like certain visa holders are not going to be subject to it. They want to have like a 3.5% tax, I believe it was, on remittances. So if you have people coming here from Mexico working at a restaurant or other business, oftentimes what they do is they take a huge part of their money and they send it back to Mexico. It's so much money in Mexico, it actually makes up a good chunk of their GDP. And even aside from that, when you talk about the poorer people in Mexico, remittances from people illegally entering the United States and sending money home, it's a huge part of the income for lower income families in Mexico. So they are livid about this. Donald Trump has been talking about even strengthening that. But even the 3.5% tax, they're livid about it. So the Mexican president, she's calling for protests over this. Now, why does that matter? Okay, so get this. What does it mean if a foreign government calls for protests in the United States, and those protests result in people attacking federal agents, burning down vehicles, inciting a riot, blocking federal officers from conducting their jobs, and endangering the public? What do you call that? You call that an insurrection. You call that a foreign insurrection. And so I don't know if Trump is going to invoke that, but legally he may be able to do that. Now, I should note it's not clear to what extent the protests, riots, and other things were maybe caused by a foreign president calling for protests in the United States, and protests which have in fact now resulted in riots and resulted in police officers being harmed. So far, among the documented cases, there was one officer, I believe an ICE officer, who was struck with a rock. And there were also at least 3 police officers who were injured from a Molotov cocktail. Trump could probably use that to declare that an insurrection is taking place. And he could notably even probably use this to declare a foreign invasion now from Mexico, because you now have an open statement from a foreign leader calling for what we have seen on the surface. That is probably going to blow up in their faces in terms of what Trump can do with it. We have not yet seen Trump use that, but he could. And that is, in my opinion, giving him a wrapped gift of exactly everything he could ever possibly ask for in terms of what he needs for the legal basis of what he's doing right now in L.A. Another question to Troy NM, you're saying the riots are an insurrection if they are preventing the enforcement of law. That is also true. I think what the difference between being an insurrection versus a riot is the degree of organization. Because, a riot would be people are mad about something, they're protesting, and then the protest turns violent. The difference between a protest and a riot is it's a very fine line of violence. And so when you get to that, that's when you get the curfews and everything else. You see in those videos where I was there last night, they did have dispersion orders in place. After 10 o'clock, you couldn't go to certain areas. And so that's what we were seeing, why I couldn't go into some of the areas, right? That's because they had made that declaration. The difference between a riot and an insurrection is also kind of a very fine line. And from what I understand, that's more around organization. Trump very much, I believe, based on when he, in terms of Trump's public statements, remember, words are not just name calling, they're not just random things, they also have legal implications. And so when Trump in his language is saying, these are organized protests, this is an insurrection, there are masked protesters organizing it, instigating it, those are important in terms of legal implications. because the legal implications could mean insurrection. The insurrection could mean he could legally deploy the military. And also it has implications over whether he could bypass Governor Gavin Newsom to deploy the National Guard. Because remember, in the United States, you have the federal military, the Pentagon, and so on, and you have the state military, the National Guard. Normally, the governor and others the governor and the mayor have to sign off on the deployment of the National Guard. The president does have the ability to seize that right, and there are certain implications on what would legally justify that. Trump, in his language, is using the language that would legally justify that. Denise B., you're saying, I find it interesting, sorry, one sec. You're saying, I find it interesting that Democratic mayors don't want the help of the National Guard when violence is imminent or ongoing. For example, D.C. mayor before January 6, 2021, and now L.A. mayor on January 7th, 2025. Yeah, so that was the case also. One of the big pieces of information that was made public by Kash Patel. So before Kash Patel became the FBI director, of course, he was, in the DNI in the previous Trump administration. He made it public after Trump, again left office the first time around, that of course January 6, Trump had in fact authorized the deployment of the National Guard. The deployment did not happen because, again, you need the governor and you need the mayor to help with that deployment. They did not accept the deployment of the National Guard. And so the reason you did not see the National Guard deployed on January 6th was not because of Trump. Trump did in fact authorize it. That was contested. This is now in the public. This is not contentious, I believe. This is public. It's because they did not accept the authorization. That is why you didn't see the National Guard deployed. The other side of the argument is that afterwards, then there were calls for the deployment, and they wanted, military vehicles with machine guns effectively watching over the whole area. It was too little too late by that point, and so it didn't happen. Now, in terms of Los Angeles, Denise B., you're noting that they don't accept the deployment of the National Guard. Well, here's the thing. You also could have an escalation of necessity. So I'm aware in Los Angeles, they have, at least as of last night, they had not even accepted the deployment of police officers from the surrounding areas. I do know, I am personally aware that police officers in other areas were on standby for deployment. All they were waiting for was the go-ahead, the call from Los Angeles saying, we need help. And so all they had to do in Los Angeles is say, we need help, and they would have brought in police from other areas. Now, you can make a few arguments on why that didn't happen. One argument would be, if you pull police from other areas, that means fewer police in those areas. That means if there's crime in those areas, if you have copycat protests take place, and if these are in fact organized, let's just give one example. If they were to pull police from San Diego to Los Angeles, very quick, easy move, right? They're not too far away. And then, of course, you have the protesters there, anti-immigration protest or anti-deportation protesters, pro-immigration. What happens? Well, imagine they decide to start protests in San Diego, and the police that should be there are now in Los Angeles. You're going to have problems on your hands. And so you could say that's part of the reason. I know some people would also assume the opposite. They would also assume that, well, maybe they were trying to make things bad in Los Angeles, because even in Los Angeles, they were not redirecting the full force of the LAPD. You could again say that's because maybe they were afraid if they redirected police, that would lead to more crime, looting, other things in the areas where the police were pulled from. You do see that. Now, on that point, that's when you would see that if they did need help, that's when you would see the local governor or mayor say, hey, federal government, we need help. We need help. We don't want to pull police from these areas because if we do so, we're worried about copycat protests or crime. My assumption is They don't want to say that because if they say that, it would justify the deployment of the National Guard. And so what happened? Well, I think from the federal level, they saw the videos. You did see the LAPD, Los Angeles Police Department, police cars set on fire, police cars being vandalized. I personally saw that. I showed you in those videos. Vehicles being set on fire. One of the things that was happening is you had centralized protests. The main body of the protesters were in one area, and you had instigators setting fires here and here and here and causing chaos, which was causing the police to be forced to divert their focus. So if they have to focus here, and then they have to send a fire truck and an ambulance, which they would have to for a fire, and then a police escort because it's a riot, diverting them to this fire and then to this fire and to this fire, it means they have to have fewer people focusing on the riot. And then what was happening? You watched, as we all saw yesterday during the daytime videos, police, they were getting overwhelmed. They were getting attacked, they were getting overwhelmed, and they couldn't deal with the crowds. That's what was happening. Now, how would the government normally respond to that? Well, they obviously needed more force to deal with the coordinated and what seemed to be intentional nature of the riots that were doing that. Why did they not call for help? Well, you tell me. Now, on Governor Gavin Newsom's side, as I showed you, he is arguing that Trump's statements and Trump deploying more agents had the effect of inflaming it. And that is what caused maybe people lighting the cars on fire. You could debate whether that's true because this has been going on for 2 days, well, 3 days now, right? We're on day 3 since June 6. And so we saw things escalating, and already it was pretty bad. I don't know if he's going to have a strong argument on that because of the way we saw things happening already. Trump, from his side, is saying this was necessary because obviously they needed help. I can also say, though, as of last night, the federal government help was only 300 National Guard troops. They were helping secure areas. The operations to secure things, dealing with these things, that was LAPD. Personally, I saw they were very effective last night. They were very quick to respond, and they were doing a very good job. I can personally say, my own personal observation as being as non-biased as possible, LAPD was doing a fantastic job last night. Now, did that come at the cost of them having fewer LAPD officers in other areas? Did that cause more crime in other areas? I don't know. We'll have to see the statistics as they come out with that. But that would be the other argument, which would also help justify Trump. So, again, we'll see as more information comes out. Seymour Butts, you're saying, question here. You're saying, and the MSM, mainstream media, is using the phrase mostly peaceful protests again. The real Antifa guys all dressed like regular people and run things from behind the scenes. Yeah. Okay, so anybody who remembers like the Ferguson riots, during the BLM riots and so on, there was the famous video of the CNN reporter, and they're standing in front of like burning buildings, and they're like, yeah, it's mostly peaceful protests. And that became a bit of a meme, right? Anytime you had people carrying out violence or there was arson, people were joking, saying, oh, mostly peaceful, right? Quote unquote. In my own experience last night, I mean, you could say mostly peaceful for all of LA, but that's ignoring the centralized focus of it. So look, I was able to walk around outside the perimeter. I was able to go around outside the perimeter. Where outside the perimeter, you could justifiably say it was mostly peaceful with the exception of like instigators. But inside the perimeter, that was a different story. Look, if you have police cars getting attacked, if you have people throwing things over overpasses, destroying police cars, if you have coordinated groups going around setting fires to random vehicles, if you have police getting injured by Molotov cocktails, injured by rocks, okay, tell me, were there Molotov cocktails on January 6th? No. Were any police murdered on January 6th? No, even though some people said there were not. You did have some police injured. A lot of their injuries were because they tear gassed themselves because of the way the wind was going. And so, if you want to compare the two, what was the difference in narrative? Was January 6th mostly peaceful because it was centralized around the Capitol building, and they didn't have Molotov cocktails, and they were not destroying police cars? Was that mostly peaceful? No, the narrative from the mainstream media was the exact opposite. That was a horrible riot, an insurrection, an attempt to overthrow our entire government. You could argue it's because, of course, it was against the Capitol building, right? But if you're having people carrying out actual violence, destroying vehicles, destroying police cars, carrying out acts of vandalism, even stopping traffic, putting the public at danger, burning police, throwing things at police, injuring police, the National Guard is deployed, you have obvious calls of foreign, what I would say are, let's call it what it is, foreign calls for insurrection. You do have that. To call that mostly peaceful is not accurate. Again, if you want to talk about all of Los Angeles, hey, I'm here in a place where the riots are not happening. It looks peaceful here. You know what I mean? Yeah, you could say that, but that's not the focus of it. The focus is where the riots are at. Where the riots are taking place, it is not mostly peaceful. Los Angeles as a whole is mostly peaceful, but not where the riots are taking place. And so I don't think that's honest journalism. From my own personal, from what I showed you in my videos, you can be the judges. And I didn't even show you everything. There were also burned out vehicles. You had you again had a lot of coordinated groups going around. It was not mostly peaceful. All right, that's it. That's dishonest journalism. It was not mostly peaceful. And I'd say even the statements from Governor Gavin Newsom, where he's basically blaming Trump for the escalation. I don't think he's even suggesting it's mostly peaceful because they're saying things have gotten bad, but they're blaming Trump for it. You know what I mean? And so this is just the way the media is sometimes. I personally disagree with that type of reporting, but this is just the way it is. A lot of things are deeply politicized, and you're going to see things on both sides, let's be honest, right? You're going to see things skewed depending on who you're listening to. That's just the way it is. But I don't think that's an accurate narrative, personally. So that it's the meme repeated, and you're probably going to see people saying it more. Folks, that said, Seymour Butt said also, the real Antifa guys all dress like regular people and run things from behind the scenes. Personally, I believe that's what's taking place. I don't know if the protesters there were Antifa. I do believe, I think at this point, we've been dealing with this for more than a decade in the United States. Anytime we see organized instigators, we tend to call them Antifa. Antifa technically refers to like the black bloc protesters, so they dress in all black. The ones I was seeing were not those types. These were dressed as normal protesters. You're talking jeans, regular T-shirts, maybe a jacket, backpacks. A lot of them were wearing those headscarves, like the Palestine headscarves. I did see a lot of that. And most of the ones who I believe were part of the same group, they had the same pair of breathers that you would use for painting. They have breathers, and then they wear goggles. Those were the ones I saw that looked organized. I saw they had sentries up. You had a couple of them. In fact, where I showed you the National Guard was present by the jailhouse, you had a couple of them, and I was standing by them, so I heard them talking. They were watching the police from movement, and I assumed they were part of the group coordinating things. I also saw them communicate. I heard them, in fact. I heard it personally. Coordinating movement, saying that's the next area. I saw the guy with the radio in his backpack, part of that same group, speaking to somebody over radio, also coordinating. Unquestionably, this is coordinated. I have photographs of these guys. I was there personally. If I were to post every drop of video, you could hear it. Absolutely, unquestionably, verifiably, and provably, if I ever have to answer for it, absolutely this was coordinated. I don't know if the whole thing was, but I personally witnessed it. There is coordination. To what extent, I don't know. But in the area I was, there were coordinated protests that did have to do with the arson taking place outside the main police perimeter. Absolutely, provably, that was the case. All right, folks, let's see here. Epoch Times, we do have reporters on the ground in Los Angeles. I'm in Orange County right now. I'm at the Orange County office. I will be keeping you updated on this. I'll see how things go today. I don't know if I'm going to go back. If there's something big going on, I'll consider it. Otherwise, I'm going to give you updates based on what our own reporters have there. We have our own teams out there, doing stuff on the ground, finding out what's happening. So stay tuned for that. Anybody watching, thank you for being here. I know we have a lot of new viewers today. Please hit the like button. Let me know what you think. Let me know in the comments. Do you think this is organized? Do you think it's grassroots? I personally believe it's a bit of both, but let me know what you think. Do you think Trump is responsible for instigating this? Do you think it's something else? Do you think this is maybe instigated by the president of Mexico calling for protests? Do you think that had something to do with it? Let me know what you think. Let me know in the comments. I will join me again tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Also, if you want to watch my full videos of my interviews at the border, I will be posting those on X. So if you want to watch those full clips, get updates on what's happening with the processing facilities, the border wall, and everything like that. They were really interesting interviews, but if I were to show you them, it'd be the whole episode. I will have those on X. You can watch those at my X account. That's at Josh J. Philipp. So that's it. Check those out there. I will see you again tomorrow. As always, folks, thank you so much for being here. Please take care of yourselves. And as always, stay informed and stay free. Thank you.